Okay, good morning. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Kiddushin Daf Yud, and we're starting about 8 or 9 lines from the bottom on Testament base. We're in the midst of a discussion between Rabbi Yochanan and Rebbe, even though, again, they didn't live at exactly the same time. They weren't contemporaries. It's probably a better way to say it. And they were discussing the Mari Makomos as to how we knew that Bia is Niknes Kiddushin, and they had different psukim. And then the Gemara speaks about a problem over here because one of the psukim that was used was Uve Allah. That was the pasuk that Rabbi Yochanan had brought. So the Gemara says, with the Rabba da Amar Bar Ahina Asber Ali, Rabba says that a man named Bar Ahina explained something to him. That when the pasuk says Ki Yikach Ish Isha Uve Allah, that teaches us Kiddushin Amasur and Labia Habu Kiddushin. That only when Kiddushin is able to enable the couple to have Bia, that's when it's a valid Kiddushin. But Kiddushin she'ein Masur and Labia lo habu Kiddushin. But if you have a Kiddushin that doesn't lead to, for whatever reason, doesn't lead to Bia, so then that's not considered a valid Kiddushin. Now, that's its own sugya. But the point is that the pasuk of Uve Allah is already taken for something else. So Rabbi Yochanan, yesterday you wanted to say that the pasuk of Uve Allah was coming to teach us that a couple that has Kiddushin, l'shem, that has Bia l'shem Kiddushin, that they're considered to be halachically Rasos. How can that be? This pasuk's already taken. Says the Gemara, how would Rabbi Yochanan have responded? Nichtov kra o ve'Allah. It shouldn't have said uve Allah. It should have said, oh, my uve Allah. The fact that it's written in this way, shmami no tarte, shmami no kulu, excuse me, that means we can lose everything. We can learn everything, which means we can learn out, number one, that Bia works for the sake of Kiddushin. And number two, we also learn this din that Kiddushin of a certain Bia have a Kiddushin, and only then is the Kiddushin valid. Says the Gemara, Rebbe, this was the question that you asked yesterday. Rebbe, hi be'ulas Baal, my avidle. What does Rebbe do with the pasuk of be'ulas Baal? Says the Gemara, hi mi boile Baal ose osa be'ula shelo kedarka, ve'ein acher ose osa be'ula shelo kedarka. This is a very unique distinction. Normally, we define Basula status based on the physical representation of the person and nothing else. And here, the Gemara, based on this pasuk, where Rebbe's understanding of the pasuk changes things and says that if a couple were to have Tashma Shemita Shelo Kedarka, she only loses her virginity if she was with her husband. But if she slept with somebody else, Shelo Kedarka, that would not be a loss of virginity in this way. Says the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom. Does Rebbe really agree to that? As we'll see in this next brisa, it can't possibly be. Let's say that 10 men violated a woman, and she still is a basula. In other words, the tashma shemita that they had with her was not bia kedarka, but it was bia shelo kedarka. So if that's the case, then says the Gemara, kulam beskila. Everyone who slept with her shelo kedarka, the din is that they're all chayiv skila. Rebbe Omer, and remember that Rebbe was the one who just tried to tell us that the pasuk of Be'ulas Baal teaches us that only the Baal who sleeps with her shelo kedarka ruins her virginity. Masha ein kain, had it been anybody else. Rebbe Omer ani harishon beskila kulam bechenek. So what do we see over here? We see that other people can bring about the same conclusion that she's no longer a basula when there's bia shelo kedarka. So says the Gemara, turning to the top of Daf Yud Amud Aleph, says the Gemara, Omer Rebbe Zera, Mode Rebbe le'inyan knas tekul mishalme. This is talking about a case in regards to knas, that if you look at Rashi at the top here, Rashi says Mode Rebbe le'inyan knas afal gav dil inyan ketala lo chashiv kibasula. When it comes to ketala, when it comes to the punishment of murder, so that's one conversation, and we don't consider them a basula. They all slept with her, and they're all in violation. Therefore, they're all getting a consequence. However, the Gemara says that our Gemara is specifically referring to the knas of what they did, and therefore they have to be punished. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. My shlami ketala. Why is it that in regards to ketala you have one mindset, and in regards to knas you have another? Says the Gemara, shani hasam da amar kra umeisa ish asher shachavi mo levado. So the Tanakama learns this pasuk to say that he slept with her. Rabbanon chai levado my abdile. According to Rebbe, he says that teaches us that the punishments are different between the first person, that's levado, and the next 9 people. Rabbanon chai levado. what do you do with it? My abdile, because if you recall from the bottom of the page, on the second line from the bottom, the Rabbanan held that all 10 men have the same punishment of skila with no distinction. So we understand that the word levado changes the consequence for person number 1 versus the next 9 according to Rebbe. How does the Rabbanan understand it? Says the Gemara, the Rabbanan who hold that all 10 people get the same consequence of skila, they understand the word levado differently. They hold as follows, umesu gam shnehem. When there is a couple that does something wrong, this is a pasuk that reads in Sefer Dvarim, ki yimatze ish shochev im isha be'ulas baal. That's our pasuk. That if a couple sleeps together when they shouldn't have. So what's the drasha in the Brisa? 5-6 lines down. Achehu shavin ke'echad. They need to be in the same age bracket. They need to both be gedolim. They need to both be ba'alei chiyuv. But if they're not, then the punishment's not going to be the same. That's Divrei Rabbi Shaya. Rabbi Yonasan Omer umeisa isha sher shochev ima levado. He says that the person who will die was even if it's levado. That's not true. If he's a gadol and she's a katana, and he does something wrong, so then even though they're not both on the same level of age, Rabbi Yonasan was of the opinion that he'll still get the same punishment as though she is of the same age, because his action is still his action. So that's how we answer the word levado. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan, Hai Svara min alei. How does Rabbi Yochanan know about this idea about levado? Says the Gemara, Im kein nichtov kra beulas ish mai beulas baal must be shmami notarti. It must be that Rabbi Yochanan is able to learn out from this pasuk multiple things of beulas baal. He can learn that beulas baal teaches us that bias nicknames Kiddushin, and he can also learn this idea of umeisa isha sher shochevim levado, that even one person will get this punishment. Next, we've discussed and given some halachic mari makomos about how we know that Bia L'Shem Kiddushin actually works. And now the Gemara wants to get into the nitty-gritties and figure out when is the moment of actual Kiddushin. And a quarter of the way down at the 2 dots on Yud Amid Beis, the Gemara says as follows. Ibaylahu, Tchilas Bia Kona, Sof Bia Kona. What is considered to be the kinyan when we do Bia L'Shem Kiddushin? Is it ha'ara, the beginning parts of tashmish hamita, the beginning parts of penetration? No, maybe it's not. Maybe it's sofbia when the husband is mazriya. So to this, the Gemara says, nafkamina, what would be the difference? Kigon sheha'ara ava, where he didn't really have full tashmish hamita. There was just a partial knisa of the atara to the osamako. Upashta yada, and then at a later point, all that happened was that, then they stopped. And then at a later point, she accepted kiddushin, v'kibla kiddushin me'acher. So, if the tashmish hamita of ha'ara, of just partial penetration, is considered to be significant in regards to Bia L'Shem Kiddushin, she's married, and the subsequent Kiddushin that she accepts is a 0. However, if we say that ha'ara is not enough, and really Gmar Bia is the moment when Kiddushin shall be when Kiddushin L'Shem, Bia L'Shem Kiddushin is done, and we have to wait for Gmar Bia for Kiddushin, and if she subsequently does accept Kiddushin, so then it's acceptable because she hasn't had Bia yet. Says the Gemara, Inami, or another case scenario where this could apply, another nafkamin is the Kohen Gadol, the Kakani Besula Bibia. Him too, he has to marry a Besula. So let's say she already had Ha'ara from another man, L'Shem Kiddushin. So the Gemara says, I have to say, I'm very surprised by this answer. The Gemara says, Amar Ameimar Mishmei Derava, Kol HaBoel, Daito, Al Gmar Bia. So that means that she's lost her virginity, in a way. Right? She did it's Gemar Bia, which means they had full penetration. Meaning they had Tashmish Hamita, there just wasn't Gemar Bia. What does Gemar Bia mean? Does it mean him being Mazriya? Does it mean full intercourse in regards to Rov, Eber, Nichnas, La'osamakom? This would require some research, because what it does is it pushes the boundaries of what we considered minimal intercourse. Okay, another sugya for another time, but it's an interesting halachic sugya. Almost halfway down on Yud Amid Aleph. This one sugya is going to take us till the end of the day today, a bit of a shorter blot. Let's continue. The question was raised in the Beis Medrash. Bia, nisuin oseh, or erusin oseh? When a couple does Bia L'Shem Kiddushin, does that bring them only to the point of erusin, only to the point of halachic betrothal, or does it bring them to the point of nisuin, where they're 100% fully married? Nafkamina, the difference between these two shitas would be, again, if Bia brings you to full marriage or partial marriage, the nafkamina would be the things that are only benefits to partial marriage. Liyorsha, v'litmala, u'lahafer nadareha. These 3 things, in order for a husband to inherit his wife, in order for him to become tameh to her when she dies, and u'lahafer nadareha, to have the capacity to undo her nadarim, that only happens when they're fully married. So if we say, I amris nisuin ose, if we want to say that Bia L'Shem Kiddushin is even broader and it even gets them fully married, then Yorsha Umitamalo Mefer Nadareha. Then these three benefits kick in, where he can get her Yerusha, he will be Matame himself if she dies, Umefer Nadareha, and he has the capacity to undo her Nadar. But V'iyamris Erusinose. But if you want to say that really Bia L'Shem Kiddushin doesn't do anything more than just Kiddushin, just Erusin. Eino Yorsha, Eino Metamala, Eino Mefer Nadara. This is rare. The Gemara really goes through the nafkamina in full. Usually it just says the nafkamina and moves on, and Rashi picks up the balance sometimes. Here, the Gemara took a couple of extra lines to make our lives easier. Lamaisa, Mai. How do we look at this? We're 2/3 of the way down, 10 lines from the bottom, give or take. And we're trying to figure out, again, whether or not Bia, when it is performed in the framework of Kiddushin, if it's only Kiddushin, or if it's even for Nisuin. Says the Gemara, answer number 1. Amar Abaye, Tashma. We have a linguistic raya. There's too many words in the brisa. Let's see what this means. Pa'av, typically when a father marries off his daughter, he is zakai bebito bekidusha bekesev b'shtar b'bia. He gets all of the benefits of kiddushin. If it's money, he gets money. If there's a shtar, he gets the shtar. If there's bia, he's allowed to enable his daughter to have bia. He also benefits from the lost objects that are hers and from her proceeds. And from undoing her nadarim. He can receive her ged, and he cannot eat the peros in her lifetime. Now, all of this is in regards to the girl for Kiddushin. But says the Gemara 5 lines from the bottom, Nises, if in fact she ends up getting fully married, which is a contrast to the Reish of our Mishnah, then yeser alav habal she'ochel peros bechaya, then the Baal is allowed to eat the fruits. Now, what's unique about this is not all of the content, but really Ktani Bia, the Ktani Nises. The beginning of the brisa speaks about the couple having Bia L'Shem Kiddushin. And then a few lines later, it says Nises, that when they hit up Nisuin. So what does that show you? That Bia does not bring about Nisuin. It's pretty clear. It's a beautiful linguistic raya. And the Gemara says 4 lines from the bottom, not correct. Kiktani, when does it say Nises? Maybe that's only Kiktani Nises Ashara. It's only on the other forms of Kiddushin, namely on Kesef and Shtar. But perhaps Bia is Alima. Perhaps Bia is more powerful in that it brings a couple to the stage of Nisuin. So there's no raya from here yet. No rayas at all. Next, Omar Rava, Tashma, 3 lines from the bottom on Yudam and Aleph. Let's see if we can find an answer to our question of whether or not Bia brings a couple to Kiddushin or to Nisuin. Says the Gemara, Bas Shalosh Shana v'Yom Echad. Once a girl reaches the stage of 3 years and 1 day, which is typically the stage that we assume that if the basulim was to be severed, it would not regrow. So then miskadeshes bebia. Then if a man were to marry such a child, obviously not done nowadays, but Rivka was very young when she got married in the Torah, she was 3. So it may be in a previous bygone era. But then miskadeshes bebia. And had it been that she was a Yavama and a Yavam slept with her, then she would have been acquired. And had somebody slept with her when she was married, even though she's Bas Shalosh v'Yom Echad, so the din is that they would have violated Eishes Ish. Umetama es boala, letame mishkav tachton ke'elyon. This is a din that we've learned in other Maseches. There's a lengthier Rashi here, which speaks about the fact that if she were to have been a nida, which again, when you're that young, it's interesting, but as long as she bleeds, it makes you a nida, even though you're young. Lamaisa, what it means that it's mishkav tachton, that it's a very high level of tuma in regards to tumas moshab. So we know that when a nida sits on a mattress, on 10 mattresses, all of them become tamei. That's tumas moshab. The man who sleeps with her when she's in this status acquires this level of tuma. And v'im nises, here's our critical language yet again. V'im nises, if in fact there is a marriage, then a full marriage, then lekohen, v'im nises lekohen ocheles b'truma. If she marries a kohen, then she's allowed to eat truma. V'im ba'leha acher mikol harav shebatorah. And if a man were to sleep with her after she was benisuin, mumsen al yadav hiptura, he'd be killed and she'd be fine because she's a katana. And if in fact a apostle slept with her and the moms are in the scene with all the whole list, whatever it is, then then she'd no longer be able to marry a Kohen. And in this brisa, similar to the previous approach, what do we see? Ktani, Bia, and the ratio of the Mishnah, we saw that they got engaged with Bia. And then Viktani Nises, it says halfway through the brisa that they got fully married. So what does that show you? That show you that Bia L'Shem Kiddushin only accomplishes Kiddushin and doesn't accomplish anything else. No Nisuin. So perhaps we have our Raya. Says the Gemara, we do not. Hachi Kamar, Yuramid Beis, 6 lines down. Ihani Nisuin de Kohen Yinhum. If in fact she would have married a Kohen, then Ochelis Betruma. It was teaching us a side din, wasn't relating to the capacity of Bia to generate Kiddushin or Nisuin. It was a pretty narrow question, and it was really the narrow question of whether or not if she marries a Kohen, does she get Truma? And the answer is that she does.
It says that one of the Elias comes.
Yes.
Well, he's high and she's Patra. Does that have the ramifications? We said before Levado.
It only works according to one of the Shitas.
Yeah.
It only works according to Rav Yonasan. Exactly. That
Yeah.
Levado does not mean that they need to be in the same age bracket. That's correct. Very good connection. That seems to be, I should say, that seems to be the case from the Gemara. There's probably 100 ways to analyze, but it certainly seems that way from our Gemara, that the only way that he'd be chayiv in this case is if they are not, I should say, he would even be chayiv even if they're not in the same age bracket. That's the correct way to say it. Very good. And the third answer, let's try 8 lines down, Yuramid Beis. We're going to be going until about 12 lines or so from the bottom, maybe a drop more. We'll see when we get there. Tashman. The Gemara says that there was a email dialogue between 2 people. Says the Gemara, Kvar Sholach Yochanan ben Bagbag, Eitzel Reb Yehuda ben Beseira. So Reb Yochanan ben Bagbag sent a letter to Reb Yehuda ben Beseira in Netziven. And he says to Reb Yehuda ben Beseira as follows: Shamati alecha she'ata omer arusa bas Yisrael ocheles betruma. I heard a rumor about you that you said that an arusa bas Yisrael is able to eat truma. Shalach lo, he writes back, ve'ata iata omer kain. You don't say that? Muchsakani b'cha, they say about you, she'ata baki b'chedrei Torah, that you know the belly of the beast. You really know how to learn Torah. So you should know this too. I'm not the only one out there who should know this. And therefore, lidrosh b'kal v'chomer iyata yodea. You don't know how to make a basic balabatish kal v'chomer. And then you read the kal v'chomer, you see it's not so balabatish. It's a pretty sophisticated kal v'chomer. But this was how they bantered back in the day. A nice little insight, a window into how they were good friends, and they could chepper each other a little bit. And what was the kal v'chomer that made Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira so confident that an arusa bas Yisrael is ocheles betruma? So he says as follows: Uma shivcha kenanis she'ein biyasa ma'achilasa betruma. A shivcha kenanis who's not a wife, and having bia with her doesn't enable her to eat truma. But kaspa ma'achilasa betruma, but paying her, meaning buying her, does enable her to eat truma. Zu, a regular woman, shebi asa ma'acheles betruma, a regular woman, a regular Yiddish girl who gets married with bia, she's allowed to eat truma. So then, eino din shekaspa ma'achilasa betruma. All the more so with kesef, it should work. So that's why we see that a woman who's niknes in any way, she is mikudeshes to a kohen, she should be allowed, even as an arusa, to eat. Now, much as that is the svara, even Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, but we have a rabbinic injunction preventing this woman from benefiting from this. Why? We had learned about this the other day. We're going to see it again in a few lines, which was the shita of Ula. Ula was concerned that if the arusa were to start eating truma, she'd say, wow, taste this corned beef, it's fantastic, and give a piece of the truma corned beef to one of her friends, to one of her family members. So out of concern for that, much as it's true as this kal v'chomer is solid, it doesn't matter ladina, it's just midoraisa, it's true, but not midorabanan. It says the Gemara, Hechidami, let's figure out what kind of kal v'chomer this actually is, a third of the way down on Yuramid Beis, and the Gemara continues as follows. If the comparison is like this, if what we're talking about is a couple who got engaged with bia and there was a chuppah, or kesef and there was chuppah, nobody would have written a letter about that to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. That's ABCs, that's regular marriage. So therefore, for sure, she would be able to have. If the comparison is bebia she'al yedei chuppah, bekesef shelo al yedei chuppah, if what you're comparing is a couple who has bia followed by chuppah, up against the case of kesef where there is no chuppah, that's not a good comparison because it's not a level playing field. There, the Gemara says halfway down, hacha tarte v'hacha chada. In the case of bia, there was bia and chuppah, 2 steps, but in the case of kesef, there's only 1 step. So the cases are really not comparable to make your kal v'chomer. So says the Gemara, elalav. It must be that the Kal V'chomer is rooted in the following comparison. The bia shelo al yedei chuppah, the kesev shelo al yedei chuppah. We're talking about a case where there was just bia l'shem kiddushin, or where there was just kesev l'shem kiddushin. Now, if you want to say that bia brings about a scenario of nisuin, full marriage, they're fully married after one maisa, mishum hachi pshitale. That's why it was obvious to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira the alim ala bia mikesef, because bia is a more powerful transaction than kesef. Makes sense. I think we'd all agree that one has more gravity than the other. And therefore, it makes sense that according to him, that it should be full kiddushin and nisuin. If all you're going to say is that bia only brings you about to kiddushin and not to nisuin, then then why is it that there would be a difference, a discussion even in regards to kesef and bia? They should be exactly the same. All they're doing is bringing them to kiddushin. It's not to nisuin, and everyone agrees that that works. That's literally the first mission of Maseches Kiddushin, that Isha and his nicknames begimel drachim, and two of them are kesef and bia. So therefore, it must be, says the Gemara, it must therefore be that we're talking about the fact that we may have an answer to our question that bia not only brings one to kiddushin, but even to nisuin. Amar Reb Nachman Bar Yitzchak, he says, I actually disagree with your analysis of the Kal V'chomer. He says 2/3 of the way down, I'm actually comparing the case that we thought wasn't even. I'm comparing the case of bia alone, of bia with chuppah against kesef alone. Says the Gemara, what about the question we asked about that the cases are really not comparable? Because, says the Gemara, that which you said, that in regards to the case of bia, we had two steps. We had bia and we had chuppah. And in regards to the money, we only had chada. Says the Gemara, kal v'chomer miya ise. We still do have a kal v'chomer. This is what Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira wrote back to Rabbi Yochanan ben Bagbag. Just like a shivcha kananis, that if a man were to sleep with her, because that's not the right form of a kinyan for a shivcha kananis, that he is not able to feed her food. You can add chuppah to the mix too. It doesn't matter. The mode of being a kona, a shivcha kananis, has nothing to do with marriage. It is a pure transaction of finances. So then kaspa ma'achilasa below chuppah, but her money, if we buy her even without chuppah, it would work. So then zu, a Yiddish maidel who we marry, shebiyasa ma'achilasa b'truma de chuppah, eno din shekaspa ma'achilasa b'truma below chuppah. So that's his argument. Still strikes me as a little odd because chuppah is completely not shayach to shivcha kananis, yet it's an essential part of the kal v'chomer. Anyways, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira continues. Aval ma'aseh shari amru chachamim ein arusa ba ocheles b'truma shetikanis l'chuppah mishum deula. So says the Gemara, but what can I do? So that's what Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira is saying. He says that I still have my kal v'chomer, and Ladina, we don't allow for her to eat it anyways because of Ula. And Rashi here on the side here, 2/3 of the way down, says Mishum de Ula. Rashi says, Damrina Beresh Pirkin, we said it 5 blot ago, she may end up giving it to her. So Ben Bagba, Rabbi Ben Beseira does have a good kal v'chomer. He does. But the problem is that it's just the Maisa doesn't work out because of a din d'Rabbanan. You Ben Bagbag. What would Ben Bagbag say about this particular kal v'chomer? So he says, Gabe shivcha kananis lo shiur b'kinyana. Hacha shiur b'kinyana. Can't compare apples and oranges. If you do a financial transaction with a shivcha kananis, the whole thing is over. If you do a financial transaction with a woman, it is not. When you're getting married, the financial transaction is not sufficient to be fully married. That's just kiddushin. You're not married yet. You're partially married. It's only betrothal. So therefore, Ben Bagbag undermines the kal v'chomer of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. We're going to pick up right here again tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. from the word Ravina, which is about 12 lines or so from the bottom at the end of the line. Wishing you all a beautiful day.